Corolla is the northernmost Outer Banks community before the paved road ends and the sandy four-wheel drive area begins. 11 miles of pristine beaches stretch from Corolla north to Virginia and is only accessible by four-wheel drive vehicles. Sparsely populated with an array of year-round and vacation rental homes, Corolla became famous for the wild horses that roam free in this region for hundreds of years. This breed descends from Spanish Mustangs, brought here by ships in the first part of the 16th century.
Hi, my name is Karen McAlpin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund. We are the nonprofit that physically manages the wild herd of colonial Spanish Mustangs that roam the 4x4 beaches of Currituck County. The horses that live on our beach are actually registered colonial Spanish Mustangs. We know through DNA testing that these horses are direct descendants of the horses that were brought here by the Spanish conquistadors in 1520. They have a lot of special characteristics. They only have 5 lumbar vertebrae. They have a low-set tail. So in addition to the DNA evidence, we also know through their conformation that they are colonial Spanish Mustangs. And the Horse of the Americas Registry recognizes them as such. We have about 100 horses on 7,500 acres, and they lived here for almost 500 years. They are part of the history of North Carolina and of the United States. Wanted to make you aware of a few things when you go to the 4x4 beaches and see the horses. There is a wild horse ordinance in Currituck County that makes it illegal to get within 50 feet of a wild horse. That's 5 car lengths. It's also illegal to feed them. The 2 reasons that it is illegal to feed wild horses in Currituck County, the major one is feeding can be fatal. Wild horses live on a very specialized diet. Feeding them something like apples and carrots that most domestic horses eat can give them painful and often fatal colic. So that's one of the reasons it's against the law. The other is if they become friendly from feeding, we have to capture them and remove them permanently from the beach because they become a danger. They now demand to be fed. We only have 100 horses. We need 120 to 130 to have a healthy, physically healthy and genetically healthy herd. And anyone out of the gene pool is harmful to the longevity of the herd. Not only is the wild horse ordinance in place to protect the horses, it's to protect the people from the horses. Our wild horses are not afraid of people. They see thousands of them, but that doesn't mean that they're tame. They do bite and they kick. They are wild, and you put yourself at danger and your family at danger for being bitten or kicked if you get closer than 50 feet. Please admire the horses from a distance and respect the wild horse ordinance. We certainly don't want you to go home with a citation or worse yet, an injury. If you're driving up the beach or staying on the north beaches, best way to see the wild horses in the summertime is when there's a west wind. When there's a west wind, the horses will come out on the beach to enjoy the cool water just like you like to do. And again, when the horses come out, people have a tendency to surround them taking pictures, and they get anxious because they don't see an escape route. So if the horses are on the beach and you see people doing something that you know is not right, the Corolla Wild Horse Fund would appreciate your help and support and explain to them, just like I'm explaining to you today, why it's so important not to get closer than 50 feet. Our herd is on the critically endangered, nearly extinct breed list. So any horse that we have to remove from the gene pool is detrimental to the overall herd. So please respect the Currituck Wild Horse Ordinance, stay 50 feet away, don't feed the horses, and help us keep them wild and free for at least another 500 years.
Corolla's history is truly an interesting one that goes back hundreds of years, well before the area became known for its endless beaches, picturesque dunes, and relaxation. The Native American tribes that resided on the Currituck mainland used the northern barrier island for hunting and fishing grounds. Because of the abundance of geese that stopped on the barrier island to feed as they headed south each fall, the Native Americans named the island Currituck, meaning land of the wild goose. In the late 1600s and early 1700s, a few European settlers resided on the northern barrier islands, but most people preferred to live in the mainland. By the mid-1800s, there were several communities, tiny hamlets really, dotting the northern banks. There was Washwoods near the Virginia line, Siegel a little farther down near Penny's Hill, Jones Hill, which also was known as Whalehead or Currituck Beach, that is now Corolla, North Carolina, and then south to Duck. The communities were isolated and remote, set amidst the marshes and sands of the barrier islands. The early residents of the banks fished and hunted to make a modest living. There were even reports of whalers here. They tended gardens, raised livestock, which ran at large at the barrier island. The bankers patrolled the beach to salvage the items that washed ashore from the numerous shipwrecks, and they recycled many of their goods in creative ways because supplies were hard to get. They traveled by boat to the mainland to sell waterfowl or fish, to purchase supplies, or to visit friends and family. The locals also found work guiding and helping wealthy sportsmen from the north who hunted on the Currituck Sound. In 1874, the U.S. Life Saving Service established the Jones Hill Life Saving Station just east of the Currituck Beach Lighthouse site. This station, which was moved south and later known as Currituck Beach Life Saving Station, was one of the 7 original life-saving stations on the Outer Banks. 7 local men were hired to staff the station from December through March. The keeper in charge received a salary of $200 a year, while the 6 surfmen were paid $40 a month for 4 months, with an additional $3 for every wreck they attended. The surfmen lived at the station while some of their families resided in the village. In 1895, a post office opened in Jones Hill, and a contest was held to change the name of this Outer Banks village. The name Corolla was submitted, referring to the inner part of a flower. The name was chosen by the Postal Service, forever changing the name to Corolla that we know now. In 1922, another work opportunity arrived in the village when Edward and Marie Louise LaBelle Knight began work on Corolla Island. When the massive house on the Sound was finished in 1925, it must have been quite a sight to the modest living locals. The residents provided many work opportunities as the Knights employed local men as caretakers and hunting guides to accompany them and their invited guests. In the 1930s, it is said that more than 100 people lived at the village in Corolla, North Carolina. The Depression hit hard in the rest of the country, but the Banks people were able to survive off the wealth of the land and the sea. During the period after the Depression, the CCC and the WPA boys were hired along the banks to construct high dunes and plant stabilizing grasses along the oceanfront and to improve the roads in the villages. By the 1940s, the Knights had passed away, and the Corolla Island House was owned by Ray T. Adams, who renamed it Whalehead Club. During World War II, Adams leased the Whalehead Club to the U.S. Coast Guard, which used the house and grounds as a base for its mounted beach patrols. The Coast Guardsmen patrolled the beach looking for enemy soldiers coming ashore or shipwrecks along the coast. German U-boats came very close to the shores of the Outer Banks, and locals were required to darken their windows and use no headlights when driving on the beach. The Coast Guard also used Whalehead Club as a holding station for Coast Guardmen waiting for assignment after basic training. The village bustled with the influx of servicemen, the church services were full, and the post office and store were always busy. After the war, the population of Corolla dwindled rapidly. Many residents left the banks to look for jobs on the mainland. The lighthouse, which was electrified in 1939, no longer required several keepers, just a caretaker. The villagers, however, didn't get electricity until 1955. In the late 1950s, Corolla's population reached its lowest point. The school closed for lack of students, and there were only a few families residing in the village. The church sat empty. The Whalehead Club was empty most of the year, though it was used as a boys' school called Corolla Academy in the summers. In the 1970s, only about 15 people lived in the village. People who visited or lived back then say that Corolla felt like the absolute end of the earth. By the 1970s, alternative vacationers were beginning to discover the isolated beaches of the Currituck Banks. Since there were no paved roads leading into Corolla, people drove on the beach from Virginia or Duck. In October of 1984, the state took over the road and made it part of North Carolina Highway 12. The state extended the road to pass through Corolla. With the road open now to the public, interest in real estate jumped immediately, and the rest of the Currituck Bank story is quite apparent today. In Corolla, you'll find many of the amenities you want for a great vacation, but not the regular services you're used to back home. No one really cares too much about the lack of superstores and necessities. Here, everyone's mind is on the beach. Corolla's beaches are clean and vast, with fine white sand that gently slopes to the sea, and the water is warm. In the off-season, you will find great isolated stretches of beach, all to yourself.